Republican State Representative Tony Tinderholt of Arlington, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. So you attended a hearing, one of the committees, you're on one of the committees that attended the hearing last month in response to the tragic shooting in Uvalde. And so I'm wondering what's next? Are there going to be more hearings?
I think the few of the most important things is that we need to keep the families of the victims in Uvalde in our mind while we're doing this whole process. I think there will be additional hearings, but I think that the special committee that was put together, as well as DPS investigation that's happening, there's two that are going simultaneously. I think that those are going to provide us a lot of information so that we can actually do things that have value, that when the session's over, that we've actually done something that'll make a difference. And we're just waiting on those investigations to come out.
And, there has been a lot of concern by members of the public, whether in Uvalde or other parts of the state, that the full truth is not going to come out and that some of it is going to be swept under the rug. Do you hear those concerns, and how important is it, and what are you going to be doing to make sure that the full truth does get out?
I've heard those things, but I have the utmost confidence in the committee that was put together, my peers that are going to be doing the non-biased investigation. I think DPS is going to do a really good quality investigation. Look, the committee that is in Austin is going to get to the bottom of it regardless. So I think that what we're going to do is we're going to have two investigations. The results are going to come out, and we're going to make decisions based on those. I trust DPS. I trust my fellow legislators. They have both Democrats and Republicans on that committee. And look, the bottom line is we just need to do things that are going to make schools safe, and we need to learn from this incident in order to do that.
I know that the Justice Department is also doing its own investigation on the invitation of Uvalde's mayor. Any concerns about that?
Nope. I think the more people that are doing investigations that might come at it from different angles, if that's an investigation that we'll have access to, we can combine that with the other two. And really what it comes down to is protecting the children in schools. I couldn't imagine, and I know the people that are going to be watching this would think the same thing. Dropping your children off at school. I have a 6 and a 4-year-old. Dropping them off at school and worrying about them all day long. Are they learning, or is someone going to do something to my children? And the goal is to get as much information as possible, regardless of where it comes from, and then we're able to act on it this next session.
And as far as ideas or legislation, do you have any ideas or specific bills that you're going to be introducing already? I mean, something that you have in your mind based off of what you heard or your own experiences?
I do. There's different ideas that I have about how we need to secure schools, but I think something that is a real issue is the fact that there were millions of dollars left on the table from last session when we passed the school security bill that no schools use. So we need to make sure that schools know that these funds are available to secure their schools. But at the same time, I feel like we need to hold schools and superintendents accountable for their safety and security audits and the programs that they have. Right now, there's no teeth. There's no one really doing quality inspections on the schools to make sure that every 3 years they're doing these safety and security audits, and that the safety and security audits and that their safety and security program is looked at. And if they're not sufficient or they don't meet what I would say minimum standards, that those school districts are held accountable, because children's lives are at risk. And when people cut corners and don't do these things, things like Uvalde can potentially happen. And it's our job to do everything we can to mitigate and try to stop that from happening.
And as far as the money that you referenced, you're talking about the 2021 legislative session or 2019?
So we had a bill, I think it was at SB 11, where we put money forth for schools. And my understanding was that TEA, I think the number was of $12 million that was still left on the table for securing campuses. What I'd like to see is schools prioritizing security over large football fields and natatoriums for swimming, prioritize, make sure the children are safe, and then go to sports programs and things like that. So the fact that there's any money left on the table is a little concerning to me as a legislator. It tells me that either A, we put too much money in, which I don't believe, or B, schools didn't ask for this money and attempt to secure their campuses the proper way.
I know that TEA has given all school districts in Texas until the start of the school year to conduct safety audits and to inspect doors on their campuses. Have you spoken with any of the school districts you represent as a state lawmaker, and have they expressed concerns to you as to whether they're going to be able to get it all done?
So the school districts that are in my district, I don't think that they're going to have any issues. We've been talking to them in Arlington. Arlington Gardens has a couple of, it has an Arlington school, Pantego, Mansfield. Those school districts aren't going to have issues. They do this every 3 years. Arlington and Mansfield both have an independent school district police department. But I do have concerns that some of the rural areas, the smaller school districts, might have an issue completing quality, right? There's a difference between checking the box and doing a safety and security audit and actually completing a quality safety and security audit, from chemicals in the school to safety and security of children to doors to windows, all those, the alarms, the active shooter situations, all of those things. So I do have concerns about some of the districts across the state being able to complete those quality safety and security audits in a timely manner. Absolutely. And that's the problem, Jack. What I was mentioning is, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, what I was mentioning earlier is there's no teeth anywhere to hold them accountable for creating quality safety and security audits. There's no real repercussions for not doing so. And so we have to look at not only properly funding and setting the standard, the minimum standard, we also have to hold those districts accountable for meeting that standard.
And I was going to ask you, some of what came out in the hearing. I think this was in the state Senate hearing, in which the DPS director, Steve McCraw, was talking about the exterior doors of the school, the classroom doors of the school. And you do have experience in school security. So can you talk to me a little bit about, what is proper when it comes to functioning doors on the exteriors of these schools and on their classroom doors as well?
I do. So a lot of people may not know, but I own a security company, and we do armed security officers. We also do access control, glass break, glass film. We do all this stuff for schools. We do it for businesses. And so I've learned a lot. And when we go into schools, one of the first things we see is that sometimes they don't keep all of the doors locked. And I'm talking private, public, and charter. They don't keep all the doors locked. Oftentimes I'll find a brick or something in the back to prop a door open. That's an immediate no-go. That's something that school districts cannot allow. I think the handful of things that are probably the most important is one entry into a school. Unless it's just a huge school, you could have a couple of entries. Some districts, the culture and the environment requires metal detectors. I think there needs to be sensors on doors so that security and or executive staff at the school can know that a door has indeed been open and propped open. If they can afford it, they probably need cameras on those doors so they know who left them open and why. Film. A lot of people don't think about window film. There's window film out there that's under $20 a square foot that takes about 6 minutes for the average person to shoot, stab, and kick through to try to even get through the glass. That would be really good to have on all of your entry points. The way that you stage the outside of the building, if you have security, put a security vehicle or a police vehicle outside. There's certain barriers and things you can do to make the school look less attractive to a person that wants to commit an act of terror or harm people. There's so many things that you can do with existing buildings, regardless of the age. But really what it comes down to in the end is the only way to get rid of a bad person with a gun is have good person or people with a gun. It's a sad truth. The only way that these people are stopped is to have someone in the school that can stop them and you're not waiting for 3 to 6 minutes for a response, because we all know police are going to respond very quickly when they know something like that's happening. But if you have an armed officer or a security officer or a police officer in the school, or a guardian or a marshal, that response can be 30 seconds, where they're engaging the individual that wants to inflict harm. They're engaging them so that the individual has to focus on them, potentially taking them out.
Does the state have enough money? And I know we're going to get an update here from the comptroller later this month, who indicates that the state's going to have more revenue than what was first forecast early on. But does the state have enough revenue to provide the funding for every school district to put in a school resource officer, obviously armed, at every campus?
Well, I think the answer has to be yes. There's some that aren't going to want it because it won't fit their culture and they won't want it, and they'll do other things. But I think the answer has to be yes. It comes down to school districts and the state prioritizing what's important. We have school districts sometimes that will put in multi-million-dollar football fields when in actuality they should be prioritizing the security of those students that they're responsible for during those hours, Monday through Friday, of taking care of those kids. So I think the state and these school districts must first prioritize what's important. And I think, and I know you agree, safety and security of the children that are put into their hands during the day is of utmost importance, and that it should be the first priority. And then obviously the second priority is outcomes and teaching and learning.
I wanted to also ask you about the state's gun laws. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion on this. And I'm wondering, several of the things that polls have indicated, and we just did a poll last week where people do support, increasing the scope of background checks, making them universal, also red flag laws, and also raising the age limit to who can buy a rifle like an AR-15. And so I'm wondering, where are you on those proposals? And do you think that there would be enough agreement to, pass something along those lines, one of, several of, et cetera?
I think first, it's something that I said before. I think that we need to wait for the results of all the investigations to come in. I think we need to be very careful picking and choosing when a person becomes an adult. We can't do it. We can't just choose 21 as the answer for different reasons that someone's an adult. They can be put in prison. They can be put to death at the age of 18. All these things that they're held accountable for. But I think we need to be very careful on how we choose the age. Red flag laws. Currently in Texas statute and the health and safety code, there are ways for someone to not have access to a weapon. My fear with red flag laws is that a neighbor can make a statement about someone and then there's no due process and their weapons are taken away. So I think I get why people want to do that, but we need to be very careful not allowing individuals to do personal attacks on someone without due process and remove their weapons that they might have to keep them safe at their home or where they're out and about in Texas. So I'm open. I want to listen. I want to hear my peers. I want to hear all the ideas that people are going to have, and I'm going to go in with an open mind. But I also realize that the Constitution and the amendments to it, including the Second Amendment, are God-given. They're inalienable rights. Our job is to never grant or take away rights. Our job as legislators is to protect those rights while we're also protecting the people of the United States. So I'm going to go in with an open mind. I'm going to hear what people have to say. But again, we need to be very careful what we do and how we do it.
With regards to the due process rights, what would satisfy you as far as a due process right if there is to be a red flag law?
I don't know, because I haven't seen any of those bills yet. We're starting to get into those discussions right now. I am not a proponent of allowing a neighbor or a family member to just make a statement and have someone come and take weapons. Again, I think it's important for us to see the pieces of legislation that people are going to author and find out what the intent is behind it, and then compare it to the Second Amendment, and make sure that we're never trying to take people's rights or limit people's rights.
Wanted to ask you about mental health funding. Obviously, every expert you talk to says, yes, we need to boost that. And I know that the school districts back in the 2019 session, I believe part of State Senate Bill 11 included a lot of funding. Do you think more money needs to be spent?
You know, not just because of schools. When I talked to our sheriff, the great Sheriff Wayburn in Tarrant County, I talked to law enforcement, their CIT units, all those units, and the law enforcement officials will tell you that there's a huge shortage of mental health facilities and beds. The short answer is yes. I think that we need to provide more funding in regards to mental health, not just in regards to schools, but mental health programs where we have enough facilities to help assist those individuals. I do agree with that 100%. And I think that there have been steps made by the legislature as well as the county. But it's one of those things that's it's a tough thing to fully fund because you just never know how many more people. I just know right now that counties are short on beds for mental health.
And my last question to you, Representative, and I appreciate all of your time on this, is timetable. You know, how much longer do you think it might take for the investigations to be completed, the hearings to be completed, for the committees and other lawmakers to develop recommendations for the governor to consider? And do you think it's worth having a special session, or do you think it's better to wait until the regular legislative session in January because this is an election year?
Well, I think I'll give you the short answer first. The short answer is I, as well as most of my peers that I talk to, will tell you that they're open to a special session. Matter of fact, I encourage it. I think that we need to act now, but we also need all of the information in hand. So it's a balancing act of, we want to get into, I would personally like a special session, but I want to go into the special session armed with the information from these investigations. And I would really like to see a bipartisan effort to protect students in our schools. I know that there's going to be issues when it comes to special different topics like red flag laws. There's going to be disagreements. But I think it's important for us to get to Austin and legislate the things we can agree on to mitigate that risk. For anyone that's watching this, your children's safety is important to us as legislators. It's important to me. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we go into a special session and we push for a special session or during regular session with an open mind. But we also have to look constitutionally at what we're doing. I think that the 150 House members and the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor know how important this topic is to individuals. And, you know, you can't put a price tag on a young child's life. And when I say young child, I'm talking 17, 18, all the way down to 3 and 4 years old. So very, very important topic. My hope is that we do end up having a special session and we come out of it with something very functional, something that's doable, and something that school districts can be held accountable for holding to a standard.
Republican State Representative Tony Tinderholt of Arlington, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insight today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Have a wonderful day.
You too.